the richest and the wisest king that ever lived. But what I'm going to talk to you about is a subject that at least half of this church understands on a personal note, but it's just something you don't talk about in church. Y'all know I'll do it though. And it's a subject that when we bring it up, we tend to say, well, nah, that ain't me. I don't have a problem with that. That's for somebody else over there, because that just makes you look unspiritual. And people will look at you and say, well, because they got that problem, they don't have all their act together with God, maybe. But that's not true. What I'm going to talk to you about is depression. A lot of people are afraid to admit that they deal with it. And so they deal with it in another way that makes it even worse. They don't talk to anybody about it because they're saved and they're supposed to be on top of their game and they're not supposed to have any problems. Well, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard in my life. Amen. If you don't have any problems, what do you come to Jesus for? We come to Jesus because we do have problems. I know y'all are waiting for me to say that I'm a paranoid schizophrenic, so all of y'all can say, I knew that all along. My mother had me tested, and I'm all right. But King Solomon dealt with depression, big time depression. And a lot of very famous Christians throughout their life dealt with depression, but they just didn't talk about it, but people knew it. But with the help of God, they were able to not only deal with it, but to fight it. And they could function and do great things for God in spite of the problem. Now here in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, Solomon wrote down words that reflected his depressed attitude and mood that he was in. He had tried it all, done it all, had it all. But listen to what he had to say. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. That means emptiness. Now, how in the world could you be as rich as he was and had 1,000 wives and holler that it's all emptiness? Where would you have time to do that? But he did. He was so depressed that he said, what profit hath a man of all his labor which he taketh under the sun? What's it all worth? It's just nothing. He was looking at all that he had and all the work he had done, and he said there was nothing in it, no profit in it, it was worthless. That's coming from a depressed man. One generation passed away and another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. Nobody cares what happens to me. You feel that way sometimes, don't you? I see some people very carefully nodding their heads. The sun rises, the sun goes down, and hasteth to his place where he arose. The wind goes toward the south and turns about into the north. It whirls about continually. The wind returns again according to his circuits. Then he says, all rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. Unto the place from whence the rivers come, thither they return again. That's actually very scientifically correct. But he was saying it out of depression. All things are full of labor. Man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. And then he says this, the thing that hath been, it is that which shall be. And that which is done is that, and that which is done is that which shall be done. There is no new thing under the sun. He was right. Anytime you look at something stupid somebody did and say, I've seen it all now, that happened a long time ago. Things that you would never think you would ever see. It happened a long time ago. But he's saying it out of the depths of depression. He's just in so much despair that nothing brings him pleasure. And people that suffer from depression understand that sometimes, that when you are in one of those modes, that nothing really matters. And you will try everything you can to get out of it. And he's going to tell what he tried, so I can save you a lot of grief. He said, is there anything where it may be said, see, this is new? It hath already been of old time, which was before us. There is no remembrance of former things, neither shall there be remembrance of things that are to come with those that come after. I, the preacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. And so he tells us this out of his despair. I gave my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all things that are done under heaven. This sore travail, that word travail is almost the same as birth pains, hath God given to the sons of men to be exercised therewith. I've seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. He said, I have seen everything that's ever been done. I've done it all, I've seen it all, and everything is still just emptiness, and it vexes my spirit. That which is crooked can't be made straight, and that which is wanting cannot be numbered. He's saying that out of depression. Then he speaks to himself. He said, I communed with my own heart and said, lo, I have come to great estate, and I have gotten more wisdom than all they that have been before me in Jerusalem. And that's true. The Bible said there was never any man that was given more wisdom on earth than this man. Yea, my heart had great experience of wisdom and knowledge, and I gave my heart to know wisdom, and I gave my heart to know madness and folly, and I perceived that this is also vexation of spirit. In other words, there's got to be something out there that can help me. There's got to be something I can do that will cure this, that will pull me out of this depth of despair that I am in. And then he makes this statement, for in much wisdom is grief. Have you ever noticed that stupid people are happy all the time? Have you ever noticed that UFOs only appear to idiots? The rest of y'all will get that. People that don't know no better are happy. Most people that suffer depression are deep thinkers. And most of them are very intelligent. Because why? Because they know what's going on. They know what's going on in the world, and it grieves them, and they suffer depression a lot of times as a result of it. For in much wisdom is grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. My pastor, the last pastor that I had, people would tell him bad news sometimes, and he'd go, I am sorry to know that. Yes. Took me a while before I understood what he was saying. Because it does. As a pastor of this church, I hear everything. People call me, and if they can't get me, they get her. Usually they get her more than they get me. I got a great big bottle of Maalox on my desk. That's a fact. And I'm just about done with that, ready to start on a fresh bottle. Every time the phone rings, I have to take a sip. It's tough sometimes. And a lot of people are dealing with some deep problems. And in much wisdom is much grief. So having said that, in chapter 2, here King Solomon is going to go try everything there is to try to see what will get him out of his depression. Try to cheer him up, if you will. He said, I said in my heart, go to now, I will prove thee with mirth. Therefore enjoy pleasure, and behold, this also is vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of mirth, what doeth it? He tried comedy. 90% of all comedians are clinically depressed. That's true. It's a fact. more comedians kill themselves than other celebrities, or they die from a drug overdose or whatever. They seemingly are the happiest people in the world at times. They seem like look like everybody would want to be around them. One of my favorite comedians was Chris Farley. He died at the age of 33 from a multiple drug overdose, and the last words that he had ever said to a person going out the door is, "Don't leave me alone." You'd think somebody that funny would have people around them all the time. And so Solomon tried comedy. He brought in probably the best court jesters that he could possibly get. Can you picture that? And it just left him feeling empty. Now, there's nothing wrong with comedy. I mean, I'm a big fan of it myself, but if you've got that missing factor I'm going to tell you about, it doesn't do a bit of good. Then he said, "I sought in my heart to give myself unto wine, yet acquainting my heart with wisdom, and to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was that good for the sons of men, which they should do unto heaven all the days of their life." He tried booze. He probably had some of the best wine there was, Chateaubriand 1. Tried all the wine. He tried everything. But and I'm going to tell you something. If you're trying wine or alcohol for depression, when you come off of it, you're going to be a little further down in that hole. Oh, it might make you laugh for a while, but it'll give you a headache when you're done. And people are turning to drugs and everything to try to drown out the problems and try to pull them out of that hole they're in. And it just keeps getting deeper and deeper. And Solomon said, "I tried it and it did me no good whatsoever." And he said, "I made me great works. I built me houses. I planted me vineyards." He had houses and land beyond anything you can imagine. And I know people that have these vast holdings and they have these huge pieces of land and houses and all of that on. And you know what keeps them depressed? Taxes. You think you own anything? Try not paying your taxes for a couple of years and you'll find out who owns that farm you got. But some people feel that would be the answer. If I just had all of this, and he said it didn't do a bit of good. Then he said, "I made me gardens and orchards, and I planted trees in them of all kinds of fruit." He did all this gardening and landscaping. And there are a lot of people that turn to that kind of work to try to keep their mind straight. And if you get bored, come to my house. I got plenty for you to do. I wish somebody would look to house cleaning to fight depression. I could really use your help right now. That would be ugly, wouldn't it, knowing it wasn't going to do you any good. Might make you feel better about your house. I don't know. "I made me ponds of water to water wherewith the wood that bringeth forth trees." He had all these beautiful lakes and all these beautiful ponds. And then he said, "I got me servants and maidens, and I had servants born in my house." He had people waiting on him hand and foot. Some people look at their housework and go, "Man, this is just plumb depressing, looking at all this work that I got to do." He didn't have to do anything, and he was still depressed. He had a house full of servants and maids and all that waiting on him, doing everything for him, and it still vexed his soul. "Also I had great possessions of great and small cattle above all that were in Jerusalem before me." He had all this livestock. I saw a Mercedes-Benz one time. I had a friend of mine who was a truck driver. We were coming up by Sweetbriar College, and a Mercedes-Benz pulled into it, and it had a license plate on it that was a famous ranch in Texas, that the ranch was the size of one of our states. And that kind of what comes in my mind when I hear about all this cattle and livestock that Solomon had, but yet it still did not do him any good. Now we get to the one thing that a lot of people believe will help them out of their depression, and that's money. I gathered me also silver and gold, and the peculiar treasure of kings and of the provinces. They said that his silver, the silver that he had, was so much that it could not be measured by man, that you could literally pave the roads with it. And he had more gold probably on his nightstand than Bill Gates had in the bank. Everybody thinks Bill Gates has got the big bucks, and some of these other people. I looked through how much they paid him in tribute every year, and it was literally in the billions and billions and billions. It was like the American economy that this man had. He had all of this money, and he still felt empty. Somebody told Wyatt Earp that money would make him miserable. But he said, yeah, but at least I can buy my own brand of misery. That's about all you can do with it. If you're not happy when you're poor, you sure ain't going to be happy when you're rich. I can tell you that right now. That's the truth. That's the truth. Poor people don't have to spend the night worrying about somebody taking their money from them. It's already gone. Poor folks can sleep a little better sometimes. Then he said, I got me men singers and women singers, and the delights of the sons of men as musical instruments, and that of all sorts. Not only did he get to listen to all the latest bands back then, but he brought them to the house. Picture your favorite band, and picture them coming to your house and doing a private concert for you anytime you want it. Well, that ought to get me out of my depression. And music is a powerful, powerful tool. But that didn't work for him, and it won't work for anyone else. And then he said, so I was great, and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem, and my wisdom remained with me. No one has ever been as great as the great King Solomon, and what he had and what he accomplished and what he did. But it still didn't matter. And he made this statement, and whatever my eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was the portion of all my labor. Back in the 70s, a reporter asked Colonel Sanders, he's one of my heroes, of course. If you're a Baptist, you better be. They asked Colonel Sanders, how much money are you worth? And he said, I really don't know. But I know that I can write a check for anything on this earth that I want, and the check would clear. That's a lot of money. And Solomon said, I didn't withhold anything from me. Anything that I looked at, that I saw I wanted, I got it. And I know people that have been suffering from depression and literally bankrupted themselves shopping and buying stuff that they really didn't want, they really didn't need, but they did something to try to occupy their mind, and they wound up broke and still depressed. It happens. Then he said, then I looked on all the works that my hands had done, on all the labor that I labored to do, and behold, all was emptiness and vexation of my spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. So here, Solomon stands looking at all the stuff he had done, all the stuff he had, and he still didn't feel any better. Now for the coup de grace here. I see a lot of people that try this. Sex and romance. Now, ain't nothing wrong with either one of them under the right context. But Solomon had 700 wives and 300 lovers, and still empty. People said, oh, if I could just have all of that in my life, man, that would just complete me. No, it won't. If you're not right before, you ain't going to be right afterwards. Hugh Hefner probably brought more damage to marriage in this country than any single man could have ever done. Had the Playboy Mansion and a house full of these 20-somethings running around, sleeping with him at his beck and call, for money, of course. And they interviewed him and asked, why did he get married with all of those in his house? And he said his greatest fear was dying alone. That's sad. That's sad. Dying alone. And here, Solomon had married all of these women, and they literally pulled him away from God at times. And there are people that think, well, if I could just have that man, boy, my life would be complete. Well, I know some ladies that would be glad to give you a man. And be done with it. Oh, if I could just have that woman. Nah. Those things are great in the context that God intends. He got somebody for everybody. He does. But that's not what will fulfill your life and pull you out of your depression. So he concludes in Ecclesiastes 12. He said in verse 1, remember, listen to this, folks, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, while the evil days come not. Remember God while you are young. Don't wait till you're old to call on Him. Call on Him now. Nor it says, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw near, when you shall say, I have no pleasure in them. Don't wait till you're tired of life to call on God. That's one thing that will help you. And then he said in verse 10, this preacher sought to find out acceptable words, and that which was written was upright, even words of truth. He looked to find truth while he was suffering from this condition. He looked for the words of God to bring him comfort, and they will. Then he said in verse 13 and 14, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. As you struggle with whatever you may be struggling with, it may be depression, it may be addiction, I don't know what it is, and it really doesn't matter that I know what it is. I want you to understand that God is able. Right. He's able. And you don't have to wait for God to cure you of your problem before you can serve Him and do mighty things for Him. As a matter of fact, He may never cure you of your problem. He may let you keep that problem, so you have to rely on Him every minute of the day. When you get to that point and you call on Him for every minute of the day, He can use you and do great things with you. It's the people that think that they got it all together that can't do anything for God. It's people that are struggling and trying to serve God and fighting depression and fighting all these other things that can really do great things for God. Why? Because they rely completely on Him. You start learning how to rely on God for everything, and He may not cure. He might do it, but He might not cure what you're going through, but He will let you use it to do mighty things for Him. The great evangelist D.L. Moody, and you've heard me tell it many times, would quite often be in his study, and the church would be full of thousands of people. And he simply said, I ain't going out there. He was clinically depressed. The men in his church would come and get him and take him by the arms and walk him out behind the pulpit. And once he got behind there, God took over, and you know the rest of the story. He rocked 2 nations for God. The great Dwight Lyman Moody, that you would think would have it all together. And look what he did, fighting depression. I cannot begin to tell you the amount of Christians that have done great things for God, that have suffered from one problem or the other and struggled all their life. But they didn't let that destroy them, and it cannot destroy you if you focus on God. You may fight it, you may struggle with it, but you can win this. How do I know? Because I've had it for 51 years. That's how I know. And God has seen me through it. And he can see you through it too. I'm telling you. Don't ever let your shortcomings keep you from serving God. You might be broke, you might be sick, you might be old, you might be uneducated, you might struggle with addiction, depression, or whatever, but that doesn't matter. Call on the Lord and watch and see what he can do for you if you'll trust him today. Let's bow our heads. I want you to know that nothing is too hard for God. Nothing. Doesn't matter what your situation is, whether it's physical, mental, spiritual, it doesn't matter. God is able. And he still answers prayer, people. All you've got to do is trust him. Perhaps you've come today and you have never trusted Christ as your Savior. I'm going to ask you to come down here and take one of these prayer warriors by the hand and say, I need to trust Christ. I need him in my life, and watch him help you fight your battles. Maybe you already are saved, but man, you're going through a tough time. You're struggling, and you're going to say, God, please use me in spite of my problems to work for him and serve him. Maybe there's something else on your mind. I'm going to ask you if you would all stand as we have a song of invitation. These folks waiting up front here, we got enough people for all of y'all to come down here and have somebody to pray with you this morning. Don't wait another moment. Step out. Come down here and say, pray with me. Please pray with me. I'm struggling. And let's get this thing worked.